authoritarianism because they always end up in the same place, right? At the
Right.
same time. And that leads me to the next clip with Bill Gates, right? This is the classic TED talk that, is now buried summarily by the YouTube algorithms. But I was nevertheless able to dig up for this podcast because it's so relevant. I mean,
It is.
he's talking about climate change, CO2, his little stupid math, his math allegory, whatever.
Pseudo formula.
Let's just go ahead and play it.
Thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. Got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero, and that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do
So one of these needs to get near to zero.
Okay. Well, it's going to be impossible unless the first one, category people, approaches zero, because everything else that he had in that equation is connected to the amount of people that are going to be there. It's just, it's unreal. And it's like, how does CO2 equal this? Like, it's a false formulation in the first place anyway, because
So the only solution to saving the earth is for everybody to kill themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just 15%?
Oh, well, that's not going to be adequate. 50% isn't enough. 67% is barely
Needs to
enough.
go to zero.
It needs to go to zero. So 100% of what people think that they need to do to exist in the world today is a problem for the future of the terraqueous orb religion that we have.
So let me get this straight. We ought to save the earth from climate change, because if we don't, it will, the ice caps will melt, right? And then we'll be underwater, and so we'll all die. In order to prevent that, I have to kill myself. Mm-hmm. So I'm dead either way.
Right. Well, better dead than fed, I mean, it's better for us to just have less mouths to feed, because then, we're not going to deforest unnecessarily, and we're not going to overconsume, and, we won't be reliant on huge amounts of agricultural game, and nothing but lowering the number of people.
I might respect some of these IPCC people if they just start offing themselves. I might have a little more respect for at least their conviction,
Yeah, I mean,
because that would be helpful, because then no services are going to be used. Right. No energy per service is going to be used.
That's right.
That's going to reduce the amount of carbon, except we're going to cremate their body. That's going to release a lot of carbon into the atmosphere, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess, everyone's got to,
Does the United Nations, do they ever, and the IPCC, do they ever, criticize the cremation industry for all that emissions? Are they regulated
Right.
like the auto industry?
That's an excellent question. I mean, because you'd think that if they were really going to try and get population down to zero, they need a lot of quick ways to dispose of all that waste, right? So
That's
it's
a lot of
just-
carbon.
It's a lot of carbon, you know. So
To
it's
kill
almost
us all, that would release a lot of carbon into
lot.
the. Are they sure they wouldn't melt the ice caps by killing us all?
right. I mean, I guess it has to be. It all has to happen in 12 years, you know, because apparently
12 years.
the world's going to end in 12
So
years.
on that
so-
note, let's go back 2009 to Al Gore warns polar ice cap ice may be gone in 5 years.
Oh man, so maybe it's like the 2012 thing where we already are dead because of Waterworld. And that, you know, I guess 2014 was the actual real end time, not 2012.
No, dude. So he says in 2009 that was before the shift in 2012. We like
Right.
split off into an alternate timeline. It changed the climate change schedule. It didn't
Right.
end it. You know, it's still a threat. It just got pushed out. To a little.
They just had a little postponement, you know. We're
Horror TV. The world is thinking.
No, it's not.
It's hard to capture the astonishment that the experts in the science of ice felt when they saw this minimum in 2005, which meant that the amount of ice that had melted, it's been roughly the size of the continental United States, minus an area roughly the size of Arizona. Nothing against Arizona. But the amount that melted in 2005 was equivalent to an area covering everything east of the Mississippi River in the United States. Then, when the real shock to the scientists came was in 2007, when this happened. Their phrase was, it fell off a cliff. And then the extra amount that melted was this much. Now, this covers the area of ice. It does not cover the volume of the ice, and Bob Carell referred to this. The U.S. Naval Postgraduate School has a team that integrates the U.S. Navy's nuclear submarines that go under the ice cap and satellite measurements that are calibrated to work with it. And based on that, they said actually 2008 had a smaller minimum, probably, than 2007. And these are figures that are fresh. I don't know if they've been, I don't know when they were released, but I just got them yesterday from Dr. Václav Maslowski at the Naval Postgraduate School. And this is the volumetric record of the ice. And some of the models suggest to Dr. Maslowski that there is a 75% chance that the entire North Polar ice cap during some of the summer months could be completely ice-free within the next 5 to 7 years. And Bob used
That was a lot of dependencies on that prediction, which was made by one scientist. And we're supposed to just do what? Not
Nod
drive
our-
anymore?
nod our heads and live in a shoebox and be intravenously fed glyphosate.
It's so tiresome. I mean, do you see how he sort of resembles one of these fake preachers
Absolutely.
who just stands up there
Yeah.
and just likes to hear himself talk, and he's like raising his hand and tries to sound authoritative. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. He's not even a good like salesman. You know what I mean? Like he
Not
can't
at
even
all.
fake it. He can't even fake it. He's up there stuttering and umming, moving away from the microphone when he's lying. 75% chance that sometimes during the summer, all of the North Polar ice caps would be gone. Okay, well, so the fuck what? What are you saying is going to actually
It's like, well, this goes back to like weather modification. Like if this was really such an issue, Couldn't they just like use lasers and make that part of the world colder during that time of year? I mean, to what extent? I mean, it's like they're playing this shell game where they admit